So each year, Google puts a call out to the entire DSC global community, asking students to answer one simple question. Can you solve a local problem in your community by building with Google technologies? So for example, if you live in a community where there's a problem and you can solve that problem with a solution, you can just reach out to the Google uh, developer clubs and you can share your idea where you think that your idea can solve that problem in your community. And that's it. So every month, like every couple of weeks, we had a event. And in this week, we had an event called the Maze of Design Patterns and Solid Principles. And our speaker is Shubham Dubey. Just, I would like to give an intro about our speaker today. He's a IT professional and an academic in informatics since last year. He's pursuing his PhD degree at University of Debrecen, Hungary. He's done his MTech Information Technology from IIPS India, and his main working areas are educational data mining, meta learning, cryptography, parallel processing, data mining, and algorithms. He is also worked as a laboratory technologist, software trainee, and many more. So I would like to just ask if Shubham Dubey can start giving the presentation. Shubham, can you hear me?
Hello, Mohammed Sen. I think I'm audible to everyone.
Yeah, so I think you can start.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Zen, for your introduction and for everything that you've discussed. And a lot of wishes for DSC. There, people are really doing good, guys. So the rest of the people, they can invite their friends. They can tell them to join DSC and collaborate together for making a better meant of their personal career, their skills, and also for sharing and learning the things. All right, so I don't know whether I'm supposed to share my video or not, but still I'm doing so. All right, today we are going to discuss about what is design pattern and what are design principles, which are used in our information technology and web development industry. Guys, I'm working as an academician since half of a decade, and before that I was working parallelly in a software firm in India, which is well-known software firm, Infobeams. And during that, I worked in 2 projects together. And what I found during my first week of joining was a problem of code relevance and code causality. Actually, when as a learner we work in our university, like for our studies, so what are the general etiquettes and what are the tricks and traps that we need to follow if we want to make our code more and more reliable, more and more and maintainable. These are the things usually people don't teach you. I mean, the teachers don't teach you because it's not written in the book. Okay, this is the practice that makes you expert in this field, basically. Though you all, if you are from computer science, you must have knowledge about what are the software design, what are system analysis, what is software system implementation steps, and what are the models that we can exploit in order to use best practices to develop a product. It can be a web product, it can be desktop product, it can be anything. So during my experience, what I found, usually I was not taught this thing, that how to deal with these things. So I struggled a lot when I joined the industry. And since that was the company was like one of the well-known companies, so they expect a lot from us. They were paying too much with respect to other colleagues that who were placed in different other companies, which were from my parallel batch or from my batch itself. So during the training, they taught me a lot of things. They pinged a lot to me that these are the things that you should not do. These are the things that you should follow. It's not only about convention, guys. I'm not talking about convention, coding convention. I'm talking about the principles. and patterns, and the best of the best practices that we should incorporate to make our code more reliable, more trustable, more, we can say, testable. Because testing is the thing that takes a lot of time, a lot of efforts. Usually people think that development is the biggest task. No, there is always a relation of 36 between a tester and a developer. So today's discussion is somewhat related to this field, and we will be discussing about what are design patterns, what are design principles, and how and when and why we should use these things. All right, so I'm going to share my presentation with you. Just a moment. All right, so there is significant importance of each and every word which is written in the topic of today's presentation. What is the why I wrote maze? That I will answer in the end. The last slide will be the answer of the first slide. So stay tuned till the last. And what is design principle and what are design patterns? But I did not write design principle here. I just wrote solid principles. So solid principles are the principle which are the sub branch of design principles, best practices that we use. So each and every meaning, each and every word has its own and significant meaning. All right. So guys, if you remember the 370 case that happened in 1970s, 65 and 70s with IBM, the tragedy was IBM has launched there around 1 lakh, more or less 1 lakh computers in the market. And what they found, the operating system that they launched was not compatible with the previous operating system that they had. So they came to the market, they did market analysis, and later this experiment, this work was failed. This product was totally failed. And unfortunately, they suffered with a huge margin of loss. Why did they do that? They could have taken the previous system for updates at the time, but they didn't do that. Actually, if you have knowledge about software architecture, in which we have SIMD and MIMD processors and hard binding, soft binding of the CPUs. So if you have the knowledge of these things, I think you could understand that thing better. But I'm explaining you. Suppose you are working in Windows 7, or suppose you are working in Windows 8, Windows 10 came later, and some of other customers of Windows were working in Windows 7. So ultimately, we got three kinds of customers: Windows 7 customers, Windows 8 customers, and Windows 10 customers. And of course, a system should be made in such a way that whenever we are going for the updates, it should always take all the properties of the previous systems. It means all the programs which were executable in Windows 7, which were executable in Windows 8, must be executable in Windows 10. And this was the problem which happened with IBM. They have launched the computer processors of 370 series, but the previous systems were not compatible with the processors and the instruction set that they had in the later releases. So they have discussed this thing in a research paper. They analyzed their failure, and they wrote a proper research paper about that. What were the reasons behind this failure, and what we should do as a hardware worker, like the people who are working in architecture and organization of computers components. All right. So what I did actually, I'm discussing this thing because though at all this is not related to the hardware, the thing that we are going to discuss is totally related to your software. But this was the lesson that people took from there. So design principles are the principles which are used to make our code more, we can say, compatible with the later releases. It makes it more flexible, so that if someone wants to add some code later, or someone wants to add some, we can say, features in the system, modules in the system, they can do it easily. That's why we use design pattern and design principle. So this is the agenda that we are going to discuss today. We will discuss software crisis, what are the reasons behind that, then what are the solid principles, how we should use, why we should use, and what are the steps that we need to take care so that we can avoid overuse of the solid principles, and what are the meaning of solid principle, of course. Then we will go through design patterns. There is huge number of we can say a list of huge number of patterns. So we are not going to discuss all of them. We will discuss some of most important, and we can say most we can say can't say important, we can say most ignored things that usually programmers do not follow. And when it comes to the testing, and if after testing, when it comes to alpha releases, or we can say alpha testing, so from some of the products came back even from beta testing. Why? Because these were the mistakes that they did. So we cannot say that these are so much important, the patterns that we will discuss today, but these cannot be ignored because there are several case studies giving the, we can say, lessons to us. So the software crisis are the nightmare for a developer or a team of developers. Guys, in 70s, more or less 70 to 80% of products used to, we can say, considered as crisis. Okay, but this rate is now reduced up to 50%. So we have covered this 20% because of now we are following best practices. We have a proper document. We have proper steps to develop the things, product. All right. So what were the reason behind this crisis? First, going to the principal or going to the parents, first we need to discuss that why we need those things. Ultimately, first the reason comes, then the thing is discovered. All right. So first we will discuss about the disruption. Disruption means the need of requirement. It means the need of needs. So what were the causes behind software crisis, guys? You can see these are the basic causes. Sometimes people comes that they want you to develop a Hyundai motor car, and they pay you like a bicycle, right? Which is totally unfair with you, right? So because of sometimes over budget, sometimes, so for them it's over budget, for us it's under budget, right? For developer it's of course under budget. Over time, yeah, of course, suppose we need a system, we need a system which has to be developed by the month end, like this March end, because whole things is going to be online. So we need a portal which should support your e-learning, which should support your online examination, which should be compatible to reduce the cheating in, we can say, our exam that we usually follow. So ultimately the time matters a lot in software development. All right, so sometimes over time, then sometimes ineffective and hard to maintain. Sometimes it happens that you develop something and you give to your customer, but it is really hard to maintain. So maintenance is also a very important task. So basically what we do, if you have knowledge about SDLC, software development life cycle, so we start from need analysis, then we will go for analysis of the requirement, like data collection, then analysis, then design, then implementation, then testing, and at the end everything which comes, which is really crucial as your development, is maintenance. A system which is highly maintainable, trust me, that is the best system. It's most reliable system in the world, right? So this is also one of the reasons ineffective and hard to implement. Then sometimes does not meet requirements. Suppose we wanted something else and software developers had developed something else. And for this thing, only software developers are not, we can say, they are not the culprit. They are not the one who are responsible for that. Sometimes our requirements change during the development, right? So the rapid changing environment is also a part of that. All right. What is rapid changing environment? I'm not talking about rapid changing needs that I have already discussed in this one. Rapid changing environment means, suppose we were working in a particular, we can say, version of a language, and later the later releases of the versions are changed. So sometimes these things make things incompatible. So rapid changing environments are basically what? the thing that I have discussed with you over IBM's case study. The environment was totally changed, and that was the reason behind the crisis of that. Then, of course, misunderstandings between team members, misunderstandings between the project developer and project manager, misunderstanding between customer and the person who is collecting their needs. So these are also the reasons. Then complex systems, sometimes we make the system which is very hard to implement, which is really very hard to execute. So this is also one of the reasons behind that. And the last one is I kept it a bit blurred because most of the system that comes to developer, and if the customer is paying, most of the systems are developed, but rarely, like what we found in a study, around 8 to 9% of systems are never developed. Okay, so these are the main reason behind software crisis. So let's go to the product, attribute of a product. So guys, we have basically three things: architecture, principles, and patterns. These are the main, we can say, attribute of a product. What is the architecture of a system, whether it is MVM, it is MVP, or MVC? What are design principles that we are going to use, and what are the patterns that we need to hire in order to make our system more executable and more reliable? So let's start from solid principle. Why we are talking about solid? What is the meaning of this solid? This solid is basically the acronym of 5 principles. All right. What are the principles? S can be understood as single responsibility principle. O is open close principle. L is for Liskov substitution principle. I is for interface segregation principle, and D stands for dependency inversion principle. All right. So these are the set of design principles that enables us to solve most of the design software development based problems. Let's go. Why do we need solid? So if we do not use solid, what are the problems that we will face? First thing is we end up with a tightly coupled system. And whenever we are doing such thing, we always need to, in development, we are supposed to always reduce the coupling and increase the cohesion. And what is coupling? Coupling is basically dependency between the classes, a dependency between the modules, and cohesion is dependency between the classes. So if we have 3 modules, these modules should be, we need to make them as independent as possible. And the classes, we need to make them as dependent as possible, so that in a short and precise code, we can put whole thing together. But making it more precise and flooding it with a lot of steps is also something which we have to avoid. So the first principle, which is the part of solid principle, talks about this thing that we will discuss in the next slide. The next thing behind what if we do not follow our solid is this tight coupling causes sometimes implementation issues when we are adding new requirements, or sometimes it generates bugs as well. Suppose we want to extend our product. Suppose we are making a product and we want to add some other facilities, but since our code is tightly coupled, it is tightly dependent, so that will create a problem, right? Then we end up with a code which is not testable. If we do not follow solid principle, of course we will make a product which is very, very hard to testable sometimes for testing, and sometimes it's likely impossible to test. All right, then we end up with new bugs while fixing another bug. This is the problem that most of the programmer face, that we are solving some bug of the product and we meet with another bug, because the problems where we solved, that section, that module was highly dependent with the module where we got the new bug. All right, so what are the best practices that we need to follow? Are the answer in the form of solid principles. So if you will follow your solid principle, what you will get to know, of course, you will reduce complexity. It will increase the reliability and extensibility. Of course, reliability, extensibility, and maintenance, that you can, we can say ultimately, by default, you are increasing these things if you are using solids. Reduce the bugs and implement reusability, reduce tight coupling, and parallel development is also possible. So nowadays, if you are working in a project, of course, you understanding about what is Git and what are other environments by which we can share our works together and we can work parallelly as a team member. So in that situation, what we need to do is, if we are working parallelly, of course, we need to make modules which are less dependent with other team members or other team, right? So these are the facilities that we get if we follow solid principle. All right. So first principle is single responsibility principle. And what does this principle tell? This is the code that I have created for you, and we will discuss what is wrong with this code and what is the perfect answer if we will follow SRP. So what does this principle talk about? This principle talks about there should be only and only one reason to change in a class, or each class or module should focus on single task at a time. Here you can see we have an interface, and in interface, that is iUser, we are making a system for login and registration, which is very basic system that usually we make in our we can say when we are developing the product. So this is we can say an interface iUser. Here we have 4 methods. Bool login, there is a method for login which takes username and password. There is another method, register, which takes your username, your password, and your email address for registering. Then there is error login, like log error. This talks about if you have any login error. Suppose you are putting wrong password or your username is wrong. And the last one is Bool send email, which discuss about how to send and what to send, and you will write your email over there, right? So this, for you, this looks good, right? Guys, let's discuss it. Let's resolve this code. For you, maybe this is very, we can say, simple code, but actually this is a complex code. What should we do and how to employ our SRP to make it more simpler? So you can see here in this one, what we did, we are implementing SRP. So what I did, we have separated the methods in several interfaces. The method which is not related to login, keep it outside. So related to login, we had 2 methods, login and register. Okay. Error, login error is not related to login. I mean, when you are putting passwords, not related to that. So we can keep it in different interface, which is iLogger. I created one interface which was iUser. Here I kept login and register method. Then I made another interface and I kept there our login error method. And the next one is our iEmail. And here I'm putting the email sending method. So now you can see every interface has one, more or less one responsibility. So whenever you will make change, there could be only and only one reason to change these classes, these interfaces. Why so? Suppose if you're changing the sending mail, if you want to change the sending mail property, or suppose you want to change interface iUser at that time, like if someone is logging, he or she need to put we can say captcha code. So if you want to do that, of course, we need to change just 2 things. First is first thing will be your iUser. There you need to insert a captcha code method for that, and the next one will be our error. You have to write something error for this as well. But if there is another module which is dependent with this, and if you made your code with the like according to the previous slide that we had, of course, this will create a problem. So whenever we have such situation, we need to make the classes in splitted way. Next one is our open close principle, which was proposed by Burton Mayer, and this tells that each and every module should be organized in such a way that they should be always open. They should be always open for extension, but they should be closed for modification. It means if there is a class, we can extend it according to this principle, but whenever it comes modification, it should be always closed. The modification shouldn't be possible there. Okay. And what are the guidelines for implementation? It tells that whenever you are going to add new functionality, do not add to the previous class, make a new class and add that functionality over there. But you have to be careful that your number of classes should be optimal. It shouldn't be more. So how we can maintain this thing? This, I mean, sometimes if you will follow open close principle and you are creating classes for each and every attribute, I mean your method or extension, so there will be huge number of classes, and that will be the, we can say, the unnecessary flooding of classes, which is like a problem for the tester. So in that situation, we need to follow the next principle, which is the answer of this principle. All right, let's see how we can do that open close principle. Suppose we have a method here, as you can see, area. And if you are inserting, if you are giving an input like a rectangle, if you want to calculate the area of rectangle, it will take the rectangle and it will execute this if statement. And the formula for the rectangle area is written over here. So this code, this line of code will be executed. But when it comes for the circle, it will execute for the circle. Then again, you need to put if, and so on. So every time when you will change the code, you need to change, if you want to extend the code, you need to write another if, else, and you have to maintain the, we can say, our hierarchy of if else statements, which is really time consuming and which is really complex code. So what is the solution? So far you can see at school level, this code is completely okay. But our teacher, they don't teach us what is optimal code. So you can see here, let's create an abstract class and put the area method over there. Now create another class for rectangle, another class for circle, and extend them. So whenever, if it is circle, if you are giving circle, it will execute this one. The code will be executed over here, and system will take get and set. I mean, get method is used for getting the input of width and height, and this will be used for setting the values of your we can say breadth, and the other one is for length. And this, every time whenever you run for a different geometry, if it is for a rectangle shape, then it will execute this one. The function will be overwritten over here. But if it is circle, then it will go for this code in the second chunk. You can see circle. For the circle, it will be different. So this makes our code more, we can say, simpler. And you can see whenever we follow open close principle, most of the time we are always following our single responsibility principle. If you've seen here, it is very complex, but here you can see we have divided the responsibilities in different sections. All right. So actually, this is completely okay for college level guys, but if you're going for the development, it's something which is like not making any sense. Next one is Lisco substitution principle, and this says that derived types must be substitutable for their base type. It means if S is a subtype of T, then object of T may be replaced by types of S. And how we will do that? This is basically, for this we need to talk about three things. One thing is precondition, other one is post condition, and last one is we can say invariants, and that we will discuss in the next one. So suppose how to implement this. Suppose we have a we can say superclass here, animal, and there are two methods, has legs and has teeth. Then we have three other classes, dog, human, and buffalo. Or you can see it mammal here, no, not a problem, because human is of course not an animal. But anyway, just consider it the crux. So we have one method of barking in dog class. We have one method of gives milk in buffalo. Similarly, we have intelligence in human. What is the problem with this code, guys? Just see, if I'm creating this thing, animal A equal to new animal, I'm creating the animal instance. This can be replaced by animal A equal to new buffalo. We have created buffalo's instance, and we can replace buffalo animal's instance with buffalo. Why? Because buffalo is extending, it's inheriting the previous, I mean, upper hierarchy class. So it has all the properties which are there in animal. But reverse is not possible. So suppose you are writing a code like A dot has leg, okay? That will completely okay. For this code, A dot has teeth is completely okay because buffalo has that one. But if you will write opposite, like suppose you are creating an instance for the dog class, dog D equal to new animal with the using of like by using the upper hierarchy attribute. So you cannot write D dot bark because animal has three types: dogs, buffalo, and human. So the instance that we have created D has three types: dogs, buffalo, and human, and all D will not bark. So what this principle talks about, we should always design our class in such a way that we are our subtype should always be in such a mode that they can replace their uh, we can say super type. All right, let's go to the next one, which is interface aggregation principle. And this principle says that no client should be forced to depend on the interfaces that they doesn't use, or many specific interfaces are better than one general purpose interface. How it talks about, we need to split a fat interface into smaller interface. Suppose we have an interface rotatable here, and we have two classes, two methods, wide rotate slow and wide rotate fast. So these two methods are there. Now we are making another class of table fan, and which is implementing, of course, our super interface, which is super class here, we can say rotatable. And yes, so our fan, which is table fan, can use rotate slow and can use rotate fast. It's completely okay over here. But if we will create another class, manual hand fan, the hand fan that we use by hand, so this we cannot rotate fast. It can be only slow. All right. So ultimately, we need to write this code here, since it is implementing the interface which is there in the base type, but it's not making any sense over here. So this is increasing our complexity. All right. So what we should do is that we can split this interface in single responsibility. We have this responsibility rotate slow. This is slow rotatable interface, and then we have fast rotatable interface, which is having rotate fast. And whenever it is needed, when it is table fan, we can use both. We can implement both the interfaces. But when it's come manual hand fan, we can implement just slow rotatable interface, and we can write its method. So this makes our code more, we can say, simpler, and also we are making it less fragile. And last one is dependency inversion principle. And this principle tells that high level module should not be dependent on low level module, but they both should be dependent on abstraction. So why do we need abstraction? If you have studied about abstraction in C++ or OOPS, how and why we should use, you must have studied about how you should use, but I think it's, I'm not sure whether you've studied about why we should use it. Okay, so this is a simple example of it. You can see there is a click button. Suppose we have an action click button, and if you will click button, the system will ask to save details, and after this save details implementation, the system will, the information will be saved. Okay, how does it work in computer actually? Suppose you have a presentation layer, business logic layer, and data access layer. It's like MVP kind of structure. So suppose in presentation layer we have our save button, which is like visible in UI. In business logic layer, which is internal to the system, and data access layer, of course, is also not physical. We cannot touch it. It's not intangible, and it's also a kind of a logic. So ultimately, you can see there is direct dependencies among them. So high level modules are dependent with low level modules. All right, this shouldn't be done. What should we do is we can create classes or interface in between, and business logic layer can refer to this module, and data access layer can inherit it. So what we will be doing if we are doing that is, ultimately, there could be an interaction through abstraction. There could be an interaction. We cannot stop, otherwise module won't work. So there could be an interaction, but it should be through abstraction. And why we should use abstraction over here? So that if we want to add further responsibilities later, we can easily add them. But if it is direct, and the direct means, we can say if there is no abstraction. So sometimes because of complexity and direct dependencies, further code which are related to this thing will create new bugs. And since our our interface was not abstract, there was not abstract interface. So whatever we will doing, we need to do proper over there. But if we are doing abstract, the lower classes, the lower attributes can define it accordingly, whichever of types they want. All right, so let's go to the design patterns. So what are design patterns now? Design patterns are the solution of the problems that we face usually when we are developing our product. And according to our needs, we have basically three types of design principles: creational design pattern, structural design pattern, and behavioral design pattern. All right. So what is creational design pattern? These creational design patterns basically they provide various object creation mechanism, how to create the objects. These are the patterns like responsible for that. So we have these set of patterns. Only the things which are highlighted we are going to discuss. Then structural design patterns are the patterns which talks about the structure, like how the classes are structured together and how they are combined. And behavioral design patterns talks about how they are interacting, how is the behavior of the classes and the modules are changing. Let's discuss the first one, which is so basically we are going to discuss about singleton, prototype, and factory method pattern, which are the part of creational design pattern. Then we will discuss adapter and decorator pattern, which is part of a structural, and then we will discuss state and template method pattern, which is part of behavior. So let's discuss one by one. So first is singleton pattern. This singleton pattern tells that a class of which only and only one object can exist is known as singleton. Why do we need this? Sometimes suppose you are making a code where there is superiority of something or something which cannot be twice, something which is unique. For that, we need to create one instance of that class. Okay, suppose there can be one. Suppose you are creating a we can say product. You are developing a product for any country. Suppose legislation of a country, or they're like a ruling, and so there will be only one president at that country. For any country, there will be only one president. So this is an instance which is single, which must be single always. Or suppose you are creating a system and there can be only and only one admin of the system. So the admin is also, of course, it is one, right? So basically, whenever we need this kind of situation, we need to use singleton design pattern. And in Java, basically, we already have like java.line.system, that which is like one system class, which is having a singleton pattern itself on it. What are the design guidelines? Basically, when we want to make a class singleton, it's best practice to make it constructor private. Or if we are not creating any constructors, completely okay. If there is no method, no problem. Then at the situation, we need to use class level method. So here we are using like get instance method, which is class level method. So whenever we will execute get instance method, this will create an instance. It means it will create an object of the class. So ultimately, this is creating a single instance of the class. All right. We should usually avoid this thing because it creates a lot of, we can say our code becomes untestable sometimes. When it comes unit testing, if there is no object, we cannot test that class. So in unit testing, we face some problem if we are using too much of it. Next one is our prototype pattern. And what is prototype pattern? Suppose you are creating a something which is the same of the previous thing that you have already created. So when it comes that we need to hire a fully initialized object, at that time we will use a prototype pattern. Suppose when you are running a chess program, you are playing a chess game, and in the chess game, whenever we start a new game, we always need to fix our pieces. And their the primary stage is always same. Whenever we will start the first, a new game, the position of the pieces will be fixed. So for the execution of that thing, we need to every time use prototype of the previously thing, which is already developed. So in that situation, it's the best practice to use prototype pattern. Sometimes we create a pattern. Sometimes it's like cloning that happens. So whenever the chess comes, like this thing that I'm talking about, we need to clone it every time. All right. In that situation, what we will do basically, we use either deep copy or shallow copy for object creation, and for execution of this initialization of objects. And this we will do using shallow or deep copy. What is basically deep copy? Deep copy talks about when we are passing new object. Okay, whenever we are calling that instances, the previous instances that we had with the new object, that is called deep copy. Otherwise, it will be shallow copy if we are calling with the previous attribute. Objects. Let's go to the next thing. That is our factory method pattern. As you can see, factory is what basically factory talks about. We have some development scheme over somewhere, and then we distribute it to the stakeholders, or we can say our consumers. So factory pattern is somewhat related to that. Just see what it's talking about. It says define interface abstract. So this factory is abstract or abstract class, or create an object, but let the subclasses. these subclasses, let them decide whatever they want to use, they can instantiate and they can make it. So ultimately we make a product. Suppose we are going to be a plastic manufacturer, and if this plastic is going to motor parts plant, they will modify it according to their need. If it is going for packaging plants, they will modify it according to their need, and so on. So now creating this abstract interface means we are following our dependencies. I mean, we are reducing the dependencies, because if we will not make it abstract, we need to define them strictly. We need to declare them strictly. And whenever we will make changes, that will totally affect the classes, all the classes at the same time. So it's best practice to use factory design pattern and make the interface abstract. All right, like this for this thing. Suppose whenever we have a factory of MS, Microsoft, and the products are like Microsoft product are like Word or MS Excel or MS presentation that we say PowerPoint presentation. So whenever you click to the Word file, it calls the instance of the Word method. I mean Word class. Whenever you click to the Excel, it calls the instance of our Excel class. And when it's like PPT, it goes for the PPT. I mean PowerPoint presentation. So ultimately, there is an abstract class, and all these MS Word, MS Excel, and this thing, they are hiding the responsibilities and the features from the higher level of abstraction based interface. All right, let's go to the next one. This is adapter design pattern, and you can see whenever we need a situation that we can say we need to use some incompatible classes. In that situation, we need to use adapter pattern, which mediates in between. Adapter is what basically it makes two things compatible, which are strictly incompatible to each other, right? So at that situation, we will use this. This allows us reusability. Otherwise, suppose we want a class, we want to put it in the recycle hierarchy, and which is not a part of this hierarchy, okay? And whenever we need to change it, I mean, we need to use it, what will happen? We need to redefine it again and again, or we need to change it according to our needs. So ultimately, we need to create a new code. But if we have adapter design pattern, basically, it makes both the like two classes or two interfaces compatible to interact each other. So we are then we no need to write it again and again. So ultimately, we are increasing the reusability of our code. So this is what is our adapter design pattern. Then let's go to the decorator pattern. Decorator says attach new flexible responsibilities to a previously designed system. You have already made a system and you want to add some new functionalities to that system. Suppose you have it's kind of like you have an Xmas tree, and in Christmas tree you want to add lights, you want to add some fairy lights, you want to add some other ornaments, you want to add we can say some laser kind of lighting shows, not shows, we can say beams. So these are the external ornaments that we are not actually creating going inside to the class, but we are projecting it from outside. So ultimately, decorator pattern tells that attach flexible additional responsibilities. Why this is flexible? Because it's dynamic. Additional responsibility to an object dynamically. It is also called as a wrapper classes. I mean wrapper design pattern. The wrapper class is the same. Okay. And what is the guideline for this? Whenever we need to add new responsibility, either expand the responsibility to existing method or add a method in existing one. So method can be added in the class, but whenever you are creating a method, we can create a class as well. Now here there is a conflict. If you have noticed in the first slide, like in the previous slides, I told you to create the classes for every method, and here I'm telling you to add in the previous one. Why I'm telling this thing? This is that giving us dynamic flexibility. So abstraction itself gives us flexibility to using wrapper classes. When I was talking about the functionality over there in single responsibility principle, I was talking about the core responsibilities of the system. Okay, like Xmas tree should look straight. It should be the straight. This is the core responsibility. So when for the core responsibilities are concerned, we need to always use one class for every responsibility. But some other features which should be associated with the system, we want to associate them. For that, we can use these things. All right, let's go to the next one, state pattern. The state pattern is used whenever system state is changing. Suppose we are tracing or we want to hack the stock exchange, or we can say stock market. So we need to trace, or suppose we want to change, we need to see how the password is generated, how the password generates. Suppose there is a function fx equal to something, and after like you are making a payment, all right, you're making a payment and you are ultimately you are doing what, you are making a request. So at which time your request is generated, at that time what is the value of the function, that is the OTP, the function of the value of the function, and that will go to your mobile phone, and you will receive the OTP, you will put it to the payment interface, and your payment is done. So ultimately, when you will do the next transaction, you will receive another OTP. So ultimately, these are the objects which are changing their states again and again. All right. So at that situation, we need to use state patterns. Okay. The next one is template method pattern. This template method tells that we will do something different, but we will use the same thing, same logic. Okay. Suppose this is the class you can see here. We have wrote some codes. These lines are there. So you can see there are two other sub modules. This module is taking first two lines as the same that we had in the base one, and the last line also as the same that we had in the base one. But in between, you can see these lines are changed. Similarly here as well, these lines are changed. So suppose we are developing a software for a tea or coffee bending machine. Suppose there is a machine which bends which prepares coffee, which prepares tea as well at the same time. So when you are requesting for the coffee, what does it do? It will do most of the process same. It will add milk, it will add some it will hot the water, milk, it will add some sugar. Then these are the same steps which it will use for creating a tea as well, when making the tea as well. But there is one step which is different. That is what? The step where we are adding coffee into the coffee mug, and we are adding something else, I mean tea for the tea one, according to request. So this tells that there is a ready-made structure and template made, and according to the needs, system decide which one to execute. So in this kind of situation, we basically have three types of method. First one is obligatory and common. These are the steps which are obligatory and common. So suppose this step is obligatory, these both steps were obligatory, and we use them because these were obligatory. So we use in both of these classes, subclasses, and they were common in all them, both of them. Then obligatory and not common. So these are the two steps in between. The circles one and the cross ones are obligatory for their corresponding subclasses, I mean classes, but they were not the same. And some are optional. Optional is what? Suppose adding sugar is optional. Sometimes we do not need sugar, so this can be optional. But if someone needs, they can use sugar. So the system will put sugar for them as well. So this is what about our template method pattern. Okay. Basically, we use them using abstract method in abstract classes, or we can say hook method as well. What is hook method and what is abstract method? I think most of you are knowing about abstract. I'm discussing about hook. Hook is somewhat like the abstract method, but there is different. We leave the definition of the hook method. If we are defining it hook, we will leave the definition, and whenever we need to implement it, the classes or subclasses we can say higher the upper module, they will define it. They must define it. All right. Let's go to the next one. So this is something which talks about all the objects together. Sorry, all the design patterns together. This is the complex structure of all the we can say design patterns. These are the patterns that we have. Some of them we have discussed, and some are written over here. And this is the structure of them. You can take screenshot, or you can take picture, or whatever you want. So this is how they are related with each other and what does they do. And According to the schedule, my time is almost getting over, so I'm not going to discuss them in brief. We have already discussed state. There is another one. I will discuss a few of them, one or two. Strategy. Strategy pattern is what basically, it is somewhat like template method pattern. What was this template method doing? If you remember, this was doing, it does that I will do, it tells that I will do different thing with the same way. And the strategy tells that I will do the same thing with different way. All right. So ultimately strategy changes. Suppose you need to add uh, 2 plus 2 plus 2. So you can do it by 2 plus 2 plus 2 directly, or you can take the like multiply 2 into 3 and you will get the same thing. So algorithm which is written inside structurally will be changed, otherwise it is the same one. Similarly, we have, I will discuss one more, like observer pattern. It is like, it follows Hollywood principle. And what is Hollywood principle? That I skipped, which is a part of design principle. I didn't discuss two principles because of time issues. So what is Hollywood principle? It tells that, do not come to me, I will come to you, I will call you. It is that if you're going for we can say, if someone wants to cast you, so they invited you to interview to take your photographs, and that time, so they are not like they are telling us the casters, they are telling us that, to the actors they are telling that, hey actor, do not come to me always, I will call you whenever I will be needed to you, whenever I will be needed you. So this is what this observer pattern said. Suppose we have a situation when we need to ping an object frequently. Suppose you are going to connect Wi-Fi, then you use the system. So it pings always whenever the Wi-Fi is there. It keep pinging there. So suppose if there is too much traffic in a system, you have seen in airports that sometimes they drop our connection. And it is that indirectly they use this observer pattern, and they tell that do not come to me again and again, do not ping me back. Sometimes they block us. Okay, do not come to me, we will call you whenever. And after some time, if you will connect them, it will completely work. The Wi-Fi will be connected because they have the slots. So in observer pattern, they have listeners and there will be an observer. Observer will observe the thing and listener will keep listening whether someone is calling to me or not. And if there is a request, yeah, I'm gonna join them. All right. So this is observer pattern. So similarly, we have other patterns as well. So that's all for today, and keep learning and sharing. Thanks for your time. If you have a question, you can ask. We can take some questions. I'm waiting for the questions. Or by the time the questions are not coming, let's discuss some other attributes. I mean, other patterns that we had. Okay. So here, you can see the next one is, which one shall we take? We have discussed singleton, we have discussed prototype, we have discussed template, we have discussed states. We have discussed strategy a bit, builder, then momento, iterator. Visitor and iterator we can discuss. And then we can discuss even proxy as well. Yeah, sometimes we need to use proxy. And we use proxy whenever we have a situation like whenever we have a situation like our object is not standing, it's not in the local machine. Suppose if you've noticed, you know about if you have noticed, you know about what is JVM. All right. So in JVM, basically what we do, we use JVM, and in JVM, the system is located somewhere else and the objects are located somewhere else. This is how the system works. So in that situation, we make a copy of our object, which is there in the remote place, and or it's stored. It can come to your system, like whenever we run a template, we can say in our system. So what actually it makes its copy, and that is stored in your cache, sometime your browser's cache, and it executes it. So it implicitly it has a proxy. Suppose you are going to hack any Wi-Fi, right? So ultimately, what you do, by proxy you enter to the system. So for the entering, for connecting, of course, you need to hire an object of that class, whatever the ping method works under which condition. So this is what proxy does. Okay, I'm still waiting for the people's response. If you have question, you can ask.
I guess we don't have any questions, so let's end the session.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, thank you so much, Shubham. It was very informative session. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks. Thank you.
And guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll join our later sessions. Okay, thank you so much. Have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.